Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to the series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one I'm going to be going through 3 mega dungeons. Now I'm not going to be going through them in detail, but these are all relatively small mega dungeons. What I mean is they're all around 100 and some rooms, and they're all within, they're not like 300 or 400 page books. They're all relatively short. This one, The Ruins of Castle Gygar, which is a mega dungeon for old school role-playing games by Onslaught 6, Roz Leahy and Brandon Yu, is only 68 pages. The next one I'm looking at is The Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain. This is 88 pages. And the third one is The Pestilence at Halith Vorn, which is by G. Hawkins, and this one's the longest at 122 pages. Now each of these is very different in its style and tone, which is why I wanted to put them all together, because they're all mega dungeons. They all came out relatively recently. I think the Ruins of Castle Gygar is brand new. It might not even be out yet to the general public. I kickstarted it, and it's now available. The Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountains came out maybe about a month ago, a little while ago at least, and it's again something that I kickstarted. And then the Pestilence at Halith Vorn, I just saw it on DTRPG, and I was like, oh, it's G. Hawkins. I like Gunderholfen. I like the Twice Crowned King, I think is what it's called. So I'll check it out. I'm really happy that I did. But anyway, we'll go through them one at a time. So The Ruins of Castle Gygar. This one is the simplest in a lot of ways. It has the most straightforward layout. It has sort of the most, you might say, like basic design. This one was designed for I think it was a Dungeon 23 or a whatever you call it, right? Where you make a different room of the dungeon every day of the year, 365 rooms. And this was made in 2023. And so then the creator basically went back through and cleaned it up and cleared it all out and worked it up so that it works, and then put it all together and put it out there. And it's a good mega dungeon for that, Now, one of the things is it's not hyperlinked or anything like that. None of the table of contents is. And you can tell the maps were created in Dungeon Scrawl. It's very straightforward. The history of the place, this is kind of what you get as a background. This description of what relics are and random tables for them, the random spells you can find. It's made sort of with old school essentials in mind, but basically any old school game will do. You get procedures for the dungeons, monster types in the dungeons, and then you just go right into the first dungeon. This is level 0. It's a nearby dungeon to the starting town. It's not actually the major dungeon. It kind of just sets the stage for the whole thing. And you can see the layout. This is how every level of the dungeon is going to look. It's made in Dungeon Scrawl. It's very straightforward, very, just clear cut. You're not looking at the map for a lot of detail except for just the arrangement of rooms and their relation to one another. That's it, which is not bad by any means, right? The idea that you need to put all the information on the map itself, it's hard to do in a mega dungeon. So I think this is totally fine. The descriptions of the rooms are pretty clear. Now again, when you go back to the procedures, excuse me. When you just go back to the layout, I should say, I mean, the procedures for dungeon crawling are going to be the same in OSE and things like that, right? You have random encounters, doors, but there are some specific things here, like free traders, which are people you can find within the dungeon that will buy and sell stuff. And then lit rooms are indicated with white circles, dark rooms with black circles. And so you can see that on the map, and that's also true on the room description, that the rooms that are dark have black background with white lettering, whereas rooms that are light are white with black lettering. That's cool. Little things like that I think are great. Anything that can contribute to the overall flow of an easy read is a plus in my book. So it looks a little odd on the page. You have these, some are black, some are white, but that's the purpose of them. So you get the monsters or important things are bolded, creatures or NPCs or locations are bolded, but everything else is just written pretty straightforwardly. There's not a lot of space wasted. I mean, and that's good, right? It's just straightforward. So if you look at the welcome mat, 0.5, a chipped dwarf statue stands here, corroded by years of wear, yet still glowing faintly. A plaque gives a short biased history of Jotun, see page 1. If the old man is encountered here, he is kneeling, praying to the statue. And the old man is the encounter here. The old man appears only on the random encounter table. He is a doddering fool who has lost his way. The party could escort him back to town, but he will always find his way back to the dungeon. Use him whenever the session needs a boost. So he's sort of like an NPC that you can kind of use as just sort of a funny, I don't know, like a break to the dungeon as it is. This is pretty interesting. Little introductory dungeon. It's got some treasure, it's got some monsters, it's got some magic items. Polyphony is the best item here. It's a cursed sword. It's +3 to hit and damage. A critical hit steals the soul of any creature it kills. So it's pretty good, but you can't get rid of it except through a curse, a remove curse. You gotta hold on to it. So it's a very strong. I don't know why you'd want to get rid of it though, except for the fact that it steals the soul of any creature it kills, which is kind of messed up. Here's the environments around Jotensburg, the environments of Jotun, and you can see it's a very simple map. There's really only 3 locations. There's Jotensburg, the dungeons outside Jotensburg, and the ruins of Castle Gygar. And Jotensburg is not given anything more than a brief mention in some of these information. It's up to you to develop that town if you want to develop it. Goes right into the dungeon, level 1 catacombs. And as you can see, it's traditional in its layout and structure. You're looking at lots of multiple ways through the dungeon. You're looking at loops. You're looking at secret doors. You're looking at some traps here and there, puzzles here and there, lots of monsters, lots of treasure. It's a very traditional dungeon. To that extent, I would say it's generic. But that's not a downside, right? That's not a downside. It's vanilla, maybe is a better way of putting it than generic. It's not that this has no flavor, right? It's not flavorless D&D. It's vanilla D&D. You're dealing with beastmen, you're dealing with ogres, you're dealing with, fellow NPCs or maybe a handful of rival adventuring parties. That's one thing I would have liked maybe more, is to see more incorporation of rival adventuring parties, because I think when you have a static dungeon, adding some rival adventuring parties in can really liven things up, because it does mean that there's going to be sort of a time pressure as another party is going through some rooms. You can create sort of a sense of competition with the party, and there's opportunities for more role play, for more negotiation, for more give and take, especially if you don't make the enemy party just evil or out to kill the main party. Or maybe there's just several rival adventuring parties. Some are actually evil, some are just other adventurers who are maybe even willing to help. But again, you're looking at just fairly straightforward. Now, one thing I'll say is that the maps are really clever in a lot of cases. A lot of use has been made of variation in them. And I didn't see anywhere where it was just like very boring one room after the other design. In a dungeon, especially a mega dungeon and things like this, you can't do that really, right? I mean, it becomes very, very dull. So there's always choice about where to go, and that's good. I don't necessarily always see reasons given for one direction over another. And that's not always going to be the case in any dungeon, right? You're not going to give necessarily reasons. So adding in some random encounter table or some random tables of noises or effects or dungeon tricks, such that when players come to a fork in the road, you can roll, and maybe there's some reason for them to choose one direction over another, right? That's kind of an important thing, I think. That's why I like those random sounds in a dungeon tables, or random smells in a dungeon table, because when it comes to a random fork in the road and the players are like left or right, and there's no choice there, because left is just as good as right to the players. You know what's down the one hall and you know what's down the other, but the players don't. Then giving them some indication of what's one way or the other is helpful, even if it is random, right? Because then you can develop that random table into something meaningful. So if you roll and it's the random sound of, screaming for help, well, then you can take that NPC that you had intended to be later in the dungeon, or that is from the random encounter table, and put them in the room that they heard the screaming from, if they choose to go that way. If they don't, well, then you don't have to figure it out. So the Gnomish Mines is level 2, and it's also pretty cool. Again, there's incidental art here and there, but it's good for the most part. The Drow Sepulchre, I like how it's batwing shaped. At least the bottom of it is. Zazi the Blade. A Dokalfir Elite. The Dokalfir, the Drow, the Dark Elves. Spiders, poisons, a Deep Bear, a Storm Staff down here. You're getting lots of cool magic items, I have to say. And throughout the dungeon as a whole, I'm not going to go through too much more, because you guys get the point. of how it works. Throughout the dungeon as a whole, there's a good variation of the kinds of creatures you're getting on each floor. Right? That's cool. I like that. The one thing that's very clear about this dungeon is that it's enclosed. It is a static space you're looking at. I shouldn't say it's static because things are happening, NPCs. There are some groups within, but you don't really get like overviews of overall factions operating throughout the whole dungeon or anything like that. Again, it's very, I would say it's very old school in that mindset. Like, here's a dungeon, you're just going to go in there and there's stuff to kill and there's stuff to take. And there's some things going on there. It's not that the level is just room after room of unrelated monsters. No, there's a theme to the level, and there's, you know, maybe NPCs there who want things, or monsters who want things. But you're not looking at this overall very complex place with lots of things going up and down and connections and factions, the way that, again, you have in something like Arden Vol or something like that. Even some of the Gillespie mega dungeons, I think, have more of that going on, right? Especially things like Barrow Maze or Archaea. Okay, well, you guys get the point. I think this is pretty cool. The Ruins of Castle Gygar. Again, if you're looking for a really inexpensive, I think this is in PDF form. I think I got it for like $7 for a 365 room mega dungeon that is very proficient, very, very engaging, interesting in terms of the sort of treasure and monsters you're going to fight. I think this is great. So the Ruins of Castle Gygar, a mega dungeon for old school role-playing games. If you're looking for an introductory mega dungeon, right? Like, you don't want to run something really, really complex. You don't want to run something just absolutely massive. You want to run something with bite-sized chunks. You want to throw a ruin into your world, and you need a mega dungeon beneath it. Not because the players are going to go through it all, but because you want there always to be something to do when the players don't have anything else to do, or they want to go there. Then throw in the Ruins of Castle Gygar, or take individual levels out of it and run them on their own. Great idea. Because you have it more isolated each floor, you don't need to run the whole thing. So it's more modular in that sense. Anyway, I'll put a link below to where you can check it out. Pretty good, or I would say even really good. The next one, The Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain, is very different. First, it's different in its layout, it's different in its presentation, it's different in its sensibility. It's way more punky. The art is just ubiquitous every page. So whereas the Ruins of Castle Gygar is like to the point, here's the information, here's the room, maybe a little bit of incidental art, the presentation of the Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain is almost part of the charm. It's almost part of the whole thing. You'll see that it's not straightforward pages. There's a lot of information and it's scattered around, and sometimes it's confusing. That's why I say it's sort of punky. It's more like, Knock or one of those magazines, where the presentation is part of the charm. But this book has had a lot of thought put into it. Important characters, NPCs, pages, locations are all hyperlinked to make it as easy as possible to run, given the the non-straightforward layout that it has. I'll say as a quick word of warning, there is a little bit of nudity in this book, but it's incidental, it's casual, it's not like trying to play itself up or anything like that. It's just in the background. It's not really a big deal. But, just keep that in mind. So the Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain, the table of contents. Here are all the rooms. Everything is hyperlinked. And one thing that's kind of cool is that the page numbers all hyperlink back to the table of contents. So if you want to click at the very bottom, you can always click the page number that you're on, and it'll take you back to this page, which is great. Now, there is a lot going on in this dungeon. A lot going on in this dungeon, and it's hard to keep track of the different characters, NPCs, plots, and factions. It's not that big of a dungeon. As I said, it's only 88 pages, and you can see here, it's not that big of a dungeon. But man, it just feels like so much is packed into this book. Okay, so here is an example of what the layout looks like, right? You can see the information is here too, but it's all on this background art. And then there's little incidental bits like carved trees somewhere in Estermark. Little bit of text down here at the bottom, which you might miss if you're not looking at the whole page. So this is an overview of the whole dungeon. Right here, you have all of the major locations and zones. Not listed exactly, but you have bits of incidental art here. And this is something you could give to the players, right? You could show them this tree if you wanted. But it's kind of a cool overview of the whole dungeon. You don't necessarily recognize that when you're first looking at it. Here's a little poem that goes along. The bellows a passing pilgrim, lo Zoazanna Mountain. There lies the holy refuge of old spirits, who no longer are welcome elsewhere, that dim cellar for forgotten tales, whose depths are a gloomy wilderness, stalked by devils and phantasms, whose wardens are long departed. Wherein black wizards once reigned, but now a white witch plots, murmuring under her breath feverish words of doom. Wherein the wind carries gold dust, and pale jewels shimmer on the cold bosoms of maidens, and the collarbones of princes all wrapped in burial silks. A crystal cage of madness grows around the heart of the mountain, fragile, sharp, and trembling, soon to draw blood. Should thy end come in Estermark, meeting its sword in hand in the earth's most sacred hollow, will surely please whichever god awaits beyond the sea of chaos. So cast thy eye, traveler, past the cold yellow plains, below the somber clouds, and lo, Zoazanna Mountain. It's cool. Great introduction. Here's Zoazanna Mountain itself and the various faces, the different locations. You have the town of Kirkitsa, the west face, Bloodbriar Forest, South Gap, West Gap, and the Crater Valley. And each of those are different ways into the dungeon. As you can see back here, there's multiple ways in. You've got this entrance, this entrance, this entrance, and this entrance. So 4 different ways down into the dungeon itself. And there are some surface locations and things like that. Adventure hooks, reasons why you might come through. And again, links to particular places and NPCs if you want to read more about them in that hook. So it's really, really well laid out. I think that's great. Really cool. Kirkitsa, a fortified forest shadowed by Bloodbriar Forest. Sorry, a fortified village shadowed by Bloodbriar Forest. You get a sense of the different townspeople here. These are the people at the inn or in the inn. The style of art is very interesting. It's realistic to a certain degree and sketchy, which I really like. And I mean sketchy like, as in sketches. I think that's cool. Here's an overview of the forest itself with different locations. The Black Lodge, the Tower, Cursed Bridges, Town Square Ruins, the Gullygug Caves, and the Great Stone Door. And again, what's interesting is that you're linked to particular places if there is an area of interest on it or if there are monsters that relate to it. But sometimes there aren't. For example, the Tower. The Tower this is the whole description of it. Besieged by treants and animated trees. In the Tower, a mad knight is firing down flaming arrows. There's a barricaded door. Floors 1 through 3 have 100 bunks, weapon racks, and a smithy. Floor 4 has a hall and a kitchen. Floor 5 is library of secret texts on fire, and the roof has the rotting remains of animals and humans killed in rituals. That's the whole description. So you could make this into a huge whole adventure if you wanted. You don't have to, but you could. Bridges across the river are indicated as well, although they're not detailed. Oops. The flora and fauna of Bloodbriar Forest is really, really cool, and the kinds of things that you're smelling and hearing in morning, day, evening, and night, which is really, really cool. I think that's great. Things found while traveling, encounters in the forest, and just really, really, really interesting art, right? There's a tree fort, the ravens, the dwarf's folly, and wizard's nectar. The Gullygug's dead there. Bitter apples, the Bloodbriar, the wizard's nectar. Just really cool. Really cool. I love this. The tree fort. Walls of wood bricks imitating stone. Bioluminescent light bulbs glow through resin windows. Inside are 1d4 wooden chests. Searching the room uncovers half-digested bones and wooden imitation coins. If you open a chest, the walls shut around you like a Venus flytrap. Digestive acid oozes from beneath the floorboards, inflicting 1d4 damage per round. So it's not a tree fort. It looks like it. It's actually like a Venus flytrap for adventurers. Or fake chests. It's like a mimic, basically, right? That's great. That's really, really cool. And the creepy doll spiders. The Black Lodge houses a 600-year-old wizard and a super-dimensional maze. Which is great. There's just a dungeon here. Lady Soot. She pretends to be a wise woman, serving the Kirkitsans with minor spells. Her real story, she once reigned over the wizards of Zoazanna as Grand Master before the Flood flushed them out 500 years ago. She returned, but the Virgin Army had already claimed Zoazanna. She made Tom Willis build the Black Lodge in order to prolong her life while she plotted her return to power. If she left her house for 30 minutes, she would age rapidly and die. The Great Stone Door, with the mural of the gargoyles who are watching. And the west face of the mountain. So, you guys get the point here. This is a really, really cool dungeon. I'm going to go back to the beginning and jump to something near the end. Let's look at the Dark Fort. Yeah, here we go. This is deep in the mountain. You get the sense of the fire and the cracks of the earth beneath it, which I really like. There's the riddling spider. Delirious with hunger, loves hearing riddles, but is terrible at solving them, angered by lies. That sounds like Gollum. There's a broken elevator shaft, and you go all the way down, and there's basically this dormitory, there's this tunnel. One of the things that's interesting about this is that very clearly you are meant to sort of expand at times what is listed here. What is listed here is sort of an indication rather than a detail, and so it's going to be up to you to map it out or to expand it if you want. Really cool here. A glass bridge to 62. And again, you can click on it. Now, one of the interesting things is that the layout is a bit odd, such that 62 is here. It would be nice sometimes to have those pages next to each other. So it's very possible I downloaded like a different file. I think this is just, no, this is the way the layout is. So sometimes you're going to have to like jump around a bit to make sure you understand how this book is laid out, how these dungeons are laid out. But that map will help you do so. There's the astral space and then the bestiary, with allies and adventurers, pre-made adventurers for use as hirelings. And then ghosts of renown, the souls of the dead linger in Zoazanna. It's great. They appear at campfires, they drink at the wandering tavern, and they populate astral space. And so they can just show up at the edge of your campfire in the middle of the night. And there's some details about them here, what they do, and if they fight you, and all of that. I really liked that page. Treasure to be found, curiosities to be found down there, dream of the world's end. And then the Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain information at the very end. Writing, illustrations, and layout by Tuomas Vakonen? I don't know. I'm sorry about that. But it's a really cool dungeon. So the Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain, I think you guys should definitely check this one out. I was very happy that I ran across it. Oops. I guess I can always just do this, can't I? Boom. Yeah, there we go. The Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain. Very happy that I ran across it. Very interested in plumbing the depths of this one and perhaps using it. And last but not least, we have the Pestilence at Halith Vorn. When I got this, I was like, oh, cool, another adventure, as I said before. Then I started reading through it, and I was like, yes, give me more like this, please. There are so many cool things about this mega dungeon. So just like the Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain, you get a region, a little bit of a region, you get surface locations, and you get a multi-leveled dungeon with lots of different sub-locations within it, and they're all interconnected. And but what I really like about the Pestilence of Halith Vorn is, first of all, the art. It's sketchy. It's all the same sort of art that I always love. G. Hawkins' art is great. It's not like the locations and the backgrounds are really, really great. The people are, just like not super heroic. They're just dudes very often. I like that. But anyway, what you have here is, going back to the title page here, is an adventure for 6 to 8 level 4 to 6 characters. So it's a relatively high level mega dungeon, which I like. I like moving past level 1. You're starting with an adventure that's past level 1. And I call it a mega dungeon because it's a 4-level dungeon, or I guess 5-level dungeon with lots of sub chambers, and I think overall it's way over 100 rooms. So yeah, it definitely counts in my mind. The idea here is that this takes place in the same region as various other Hawkins, products. You see Gunderholfen on there. You see the bottomless pits of Zorth, which have been, I think, detailed in some other book. So lots of the locations have been detailed from other books. And the idea is there's this pestilence that's breaking out at this one village, and you go there, and it turns out there's a connection to this ruin where these cult of death and decay and plague and stuff are starting to spread. And you go down there and you're just trying to put an end to it, but there's competing cults, and there are some people trying to reclaim their long lost ruins, and there are some things that have moved in since. And so it's a really cool adventure in terms of there's lots of faction play, there's a lot of things going on the surface, and there is a plot, unlike the Ruins of Castle Gygar, unlike the Ghost of Zoazanna Mountains has someone at the bottom of the dungeon doing something bad. This one, too, is that the cultists are trying to activate this Colossus, and there's a timeline, even, of events by which those cultists will take over. And reinforcements are added in after a certain amount of time, which is cool. As the cultists get closer and closer to their goal, more and more of them are coming. Every 3 days, 1 to 4 cultist rabble show up. Every 5 days, 1 to 2 cultist guards. Every 10 days, there's a 30% chance of a cultist sorcerer, and after 30 days, you get the high cultist. Now, you could change the timeline if you wanted, but that's the basic timeline there. And there's a timeline of events later in the book. There's also a rival adventuring party, and they're pretty bad. They're high level. 6th level human priestess, 5th level human assassin, 5th level human fighter, 5th level human fighter, and 6th level magic user cultist. And they're brutal. They're not good. But they're all kind of funny in their own way. Or not necessarily funny, but unique. So there's Brigford or Bridgeford, who is I think Brigford. She's the priestess. She's actually the cultist, or she's actually a cultist. She's hiding the diseased favor of her god. There is Triali, who giggles while she fights you. And she's so pretty that you have to roll all NPCs and hirelings have to roll morale checks. Otherwise, they're charmed by her for 1d6 hours just as an automatic effect. You've got Norbert, who just kills totally silently. You've got Garfield. I love Garfield. He's my favorite. He's a lean man from the deep south. A Rhodamant. He covers his athletic body with oil and challenges other fighters to duels. Poses to show off his figure before combat. I love that. And then Valeri, who hates other women. You should go through them first. Really cool adventure. Great adventuring in the town. You arrive at the town and everyone's sick. It's sort of your starting town. Now, it's old school, as you can see. It's very old school in its sensibilities because you can look in every house has where its treasure is hidden, right? So the fisherman's treasure is hidden, where the blacksmith's treasure is hidden, where the stable boy's treasure is hidden. Every NPC has their, or not every NPC, but many NPCs have their secrets, have their reasons for being here, and what they're doing. Some of them are good, some of them are not good. And some of them have connections to the two major cult factions that are in the world. Here's the timeline of village events. You have 38 days. If the players do nothing, then this is what will happen. That's cool. 38 days in game doesn't seem like actually all that much. So I would probably expand this a little bit, but on the other hand, I haven't run it, so who knows. Okay, so I'm going through all the prelude, but here's the ruin itself, and you can see there's just a bunch of little ruins with their detail to the right. Sometimes they have extra maps detailing a little bit more than what you see on the surface. This reminds me of like, so for example, Barrow Maze, where you have the sort of barrows on the surface with sort of sub-dungeons there before you get to the dungeon itself. It's a little bit like this. I like that a lot. Lots of cool ones, lots of cool side views, and that's what I love so much about this dungeon is the side views. Over and over and over there are side views, which means that you're given a sense of the verticality of the dungeon, and that's what you're going to be expressing to your players, verticality, because this is a cavern going down into the earth. And so often we think of our dungeons as, two-dimensional spaces, but they're not. They're three-dimensional, or at least in the imagination they're three-dimensional. And so you need to bring that in, and I really like this product for that fact. It plays with verticality. It sometimes even, creates kind of tricks and traps based on verticality, which are really, really good. So again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you get a sense of each of the dungeon floors. This is the first dungeon floor, and there's one kind of tricky thing about this that took me a while to figure out. You'll see on the next page this diagram here, areas 20, 31, and 32. Then it says area 21 here. That's a mistake. It should be area 20. But basically what you're looking at is a vertical stalagmite coming out, or stalactite coming out of the ceiling, and that's actually right here between 30 G and A right here. So that stalactite is right below this. And so this is just open space all the way down to the dungeon floor, the cavern floor, which you'll see in a minute. Things like that you can use. Now, I wish it was kind of detailed a little bit more clearly there, but that's the idea. Here's the cross section of Halith Vorn and the great cavern. So cool looking. And you can see the different levels at which you're acting, the party's acting. And as you go down, again, there's great art throughout. Now this is, I think it said it's based on Caverns of Thracia, or it's inspired by Caverns of Thracia, which I haven't read. I've never played through it, but this is a really cool adventure. And you can see as you go down, these open gaps in each of the floors get bigger, and you could connect yourself to them. You could climb down them to get to the other floors. You don't have to use the other entrances. You could fly down. Level 3 here, you also have, again, big caverns opening up with the waterfall and stuff like that. So again, it's not huge. You're not looking at thousands of rooms, hundreds of rooms per floor. You're looking at a few rooms per floor that get you over 100 all the way down to the cavern floor itself. Now, again, I'm only about halfway through the book, but I think you get the sense of the kind of book that this is. Really cool, good, old school adventure with, again, more modern I would say not more modern sensibilities, but sort of playing with the old school sensibilities. It's certainly not Zoazanna Mountain, which is definitely a contemporary product. I mean, this is contemporary too; it just came out, but it's in the vein of the old school. But it's not as vanilla. It's not as basic as the Ruins of Castle Gygar. This one is much more complex to run. It's higher level, and it's just the result of someone who really knows what they're doing. Maybe that's what I would say. G. Hawkins knows how to make a good dungeon. This is a good dungeon, good adventure. Lots of factions, lots of connections, lots of ways of traveling up and down, lots of hooks, lots of magic items, treasure, threats, and it's not. You're not forced into a particular path. You're not forced into doing anything in particular. It's up to you how you approach the dungeon. So I highly, highly recommend Pestilence at Halith Vorn. I was very happy when I ran into it. So Pestilence of Halith Vorn, The Ghosts of Zoazanna Mountain, and The Ruins of Castle Gygar. I'll put links below to where you can get them all. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. Hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you all in another video.